Keenan will now continue the opposition case.
Team Korea's case today stands fundamentally on a false dichotomy. A false dichotomy between the environment and the economy. And a dichotomy side Canada today refuses to accept. On side Canada, we have already shown you, and we will continue to show you, that economic development and environmental regulation fit hand in hand. And in fact, in many cases, they must fit hand in hand, or else neither is seen. But before we get into the last point of Team Canada today, let's look at exactly what side Korea has told them in their told us in their last point and in their case in general. So let's start at the end. Let's look at this idea of perpetuating irresponsibility. Essentially the idea that the developed world is what caused the problems that we're currently seeing, and therefore it should be the developed world and the developed world alone that fixes those problems. Well, on side Canada today, we think this falls for a number of reasons. First off, we would argue that it's not mutually exclusive. We would say that just because other people have polluted in the past does not give everyone carte blanche to pollute into the future. We do not think that developed countries get the right to pollute because it has been done before. And beyond that, we think that developed countries do have a responsibility to the environment, but that responsibility goes hand in hand with developing countries. Now, why is that? Well, we would say that when you let one group of countries not follow environmental law and environmental regulations, then no countries do it, because those countries can effectively undercut every country in the global community. This is the collective action problem we currently see. But beyond this, we would say that the harms of global environmental degradation are specifically targeted at developing nations for a couple of reasons. The most pressing of those is that rising sea levels inordinately affect developing countries. So in other words, even if we say that all of the responsibility for the current environmental degradation is on developed countries, the harms that will be felt from that are felt primarily in the developing world. And because of that, we think they have an integral part to play in fixing environmental problems.
Before we move on, sir.
No, thank you. Beyond this, let's look at their assertions basically today about green technology. Green technology is not as far off as South Korea would like you to believe. In fact, green technology is already widely available in at least some forms. Is it perfect? No. Will it get better? Yes. Has it been getting better? Also yes. What we've seen is an incredible amount of money being poured into green technology. And on Side Canada today, I'll take you in a moment, we would say that when more countries decide to use green technologies, we're going to see more money in those green technologies because markets will be opening up. Yes?
If it's true that green technology is available to everyone, then explain your example of Nepal, why people die because they don't have water purifiers in the first place.
First off, we never use Nepal as an example. We have no idea where they heard that one from. But beyond that, we would say that companies are the ones that develop green technology. And because it's companies and not countries, there is a profit motive to sell those technologies to whoever wants them. Whether they be in Nepal, or in Sudan, or in India, or in China, there is a profit motive there. And beyond, and we think that this is exactly why their point and their example about Egypt falls. There's no reason why a company would refuse to trade with Egypt on the basis of, well, you know, they're Egyptians. Beyond this, we reject the idea that green technology is not good enough at the moment. Is it as good as we'd like it to be? No, of course it's not. But at the same time, it still is very effective in cleaning water. It's very effective at cleaning water, it's very effective at cleaning the air, and it's very effective at reducing the carbon emissions that both sides of the House want to see limited today. Now beyond this, let's look back at exactly what Team Korea proposed as their model. They proposed as their model today that there would only be a lack of cap on emissions for developing countries. But then they've gone on and tried to talk about much more than just a cap on emissions. They've tried to also discuss the ideas of water pollution and of air pollution that go far beyond the right to emit pollution and carbon dioxide in particular. So what we would say today is that Team Korea needs to base itself either in global warming or in the environment in general. We think they need to do the latter, and they haven't done that yet.
Clarification.
No thank you. Now let's look at exactly what side Canada is going to show you today. We've already shown you that the environment is in peril, and it's a necessity that all countries get involved in fixing global environmental problems. Now let's look at that third point, the idea of mortgaging the future. And in it, I will discuss to you the idea that environmental degradation is actually bad for development. what we say on Side Canada today is that environmental degradation at the end of the day hurts development in the long run. Now, why is that? Well, we'd say that first off, there's a problem in human psychology. There's a lack of thought for the future and too much emphasis put on the immediate. We'd say that people, at the end of the day, are essentially short-sighted. And we would say also that the environment is necessary for development, but it doesn't feel necessary for development. It doesn't feel immediate. It's something that's far off. And because of that, it's often ignored in the quest for immediate profit. Why is the environment necessary for development? Well, we would argue, I'll take you in a moment, that it's necessary on two levels. First off, because at the end of the day, it is the people within a country that make up that economic system, and beyond that, unsustainable resource extraction is not going to carry it forth into the future.
Instead of telling us in how environmental protection is good and that you reject a false dichotomy, whatever that is, tell us how developing countries can simply afford these kind of systems.
Well, what we would say today on Side Opposition is that at the Copenhagen Accord, under the status quo, there is incredible movement amongst developed countries to subsidize developing countries so that they can achieve these green technologies. This is something we've argued down the bench today. But beyond that, we would say that it's actually in the best interest of developing countries right now to invest in these green technologies, even if it doesn't make them as much money in the short term, because at the end of the day, in the long run, this is what leads to development. So let's look at exactly what this point says. On the first point, let's look at this idea of people. And we have this, and we say at the end of the day, that Side Korea today has ignored the fact that at some point, people have to live in the developing countries that they want to have with no environmental regulations. Now, there are negative effects to living in a polluted country. But what are those? Well, we'd say that they're actually incredible lowered productivity from things like lung disease, from living with incredible air pollution, and other diseases from living with incredible water pollution. We see that it's estimated that growth in China is limited by 2.6% every year on the basis of just its air pollution affecting the health of its citizens. So we would say, at the end of the day, that the productivity of individual citizens that must live in environmentally degraded areas is actually going to hurt development in the short run, and especially in the long run. But beyond this, we would look at the idea of unsustainable resource extraction. We'd say that unsustainable growth in a particular resource is a bad thing. It does lead to short-term prosperity, but there is incredible long-term damage from it, because you reduce the ability to maintain healthy growth after that resource has been used up. So we would look here at the example of Tonga, which had phosphorus mining on an incredible scale. But because the phosphorus mining was so intense, it reduced the ability of Tonga, once the phosphorus was gone, to have any other economy. And guess what happened? Well, we saw the neo-colonialism that Side Korea wants to move us away from. Because now Tonga's only economic factor is dumping garbage from the developed world in their territorial waters. Most primarily nuclear waste and tires. So what we would say on Side Opposition today is dumping nuclear waste and tires is not the base for sustainable growth. And beyond that, it actually leads to the neo-colonialism neither side wants to see today. And beyond this, we look at the example of Yemen, which is essentially drying out because of the unsustainable growth in the cat growing industry. What we would say is that sustainable resource procedures, like limiting the amount of water that someone can take out of an aquifer, actually helps development in the long run. And we limit the harms that we see from people focusing too much on the short term and not enough on the long term. So in the end, the Green Pact cannot be put in front of green technology or green policy. And that is why we beg to oppose the motion.